Good evening and welcome to Carlisle Local School Board or School District Board of Education organizational meeting for Monday, January 3rd. We just had and concluded our tax budget hearing and our calendar hearing, and now we'll move on to our organizational meeting. This meeting is a meeting for the Board of Education for the public purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is time for public participation during the regular board meetings as indicated in the agenda. So first, we will have swearing in of newly re-elected board members, Molly McIntosh and Bill Jewell, and swearing in of the newly elected board member, Amanda Morris.
We'll go alphabetically.
Okay.
So, Mr. Jewell, would you please stand up and raise your right hand? Will you, William Jewell, solemnly swear that you will support the constitutions of the United States and the state of Ohio, and that you will in all respects uphold and enforce the policies of the Ohio Department of Education and the Carlisle Board of Education, and that you will faithfully discharge the duties of school board member for which you are about to assume? If so, answer, I will.
I will.
Congratulations. There's 2 copies I need now.
Okay.
Mrs. McIntosh, could you please stand and raise your right hand? Did you memorize that?
No.
You, Molly McIntosh, solemnly swear that you will support the constitutions of the United States and the state of Ohio, and that you will in all respects uphold and enforce the policies of the Ohio Department of Education and the Carlisle Board of Education, and that you will faithfully discharge the duties of school board member for which you are about to assume. If so, answer with, I will.
I will.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'll need one of those back.
Okay.
Last but not least, Mrs. Morris, will you stand and raise your right hand, please? Amanda Morris, do you solemnly swear that you will support the constitutions of the United States and the state of Ohio, and that you will in all respects uphold and enforce the policies of the Ohio Department of Education and the Carlisle Board of Education, and that you will faithfully discharge the duties of school board member for which you are about to assume? If so, answer, I will.
I will.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'll need one of those.
Heather?
Now we have 5 official board members. President Pro Tem, you can roll with the agenda.
Thank you. Could we have roll call, please, Mr. Bassler?
Mrs. McIntosh.
Here.
Mr. Jewell.
Here.
Mrs. Miller.
Here.
Mrs. Milligan.
Here.
And Mrs. Morris.
Here.
Thank you. Could we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, we will be accepting nominations for board president.
I'd like to nominate Molly.
Do we have any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Bill.
Okay. Anyone else? So we'll close the nomination.
Will we need a second for the nomination?
So for either one of them.
Pardon me?
You'll need a second for either one or both?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we need a second. If we're going to vote between
Okay.
the 2, I think we need a second for both.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Morris.
Which one?
You can do both, right?
You can, just not at
Oh.
the same time. A second for Molly McIntosh, Mrs. Morris, yes?
Yes.
A second for Mr. Jewell, Mrs. Morris?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Morris. And how do we do this voting? Dan?
Never done it this way before. but
I know,
we would
that's
do-
why I was asking.
We would do the first nomination and do yes and no. And then we would do second nomination and do yes and no.
Okay, do Bill and I abstain?
You don't have to. No, you do not. You can
Okay.
vote, you can vote for yourself.
We'll need a
if you would
vote,
like
yes,
to.
because there won't be enough otherwise. Yes. Okay. Can I get roll call, please, Mr. Bassler?
And this is a yes or no for Mrs. Molly McIntosh as president. Mrs. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
No.
Mrs. Miller?
No.
Mrs. Milligan?
Yes.
And Mrs. Morris?
No.
So I have 3 noes, 2 yeses. Then we will move on to Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
I'll go the same order.
Okay.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris.
Yes.
I have 5 yes and 0 no. I guess congratulations are in order. Mr. Bill Jewell will be our board president for 2022.
Moving on, we need to have nominations for vice president.
I nominate Molly McIntosh.
And once we get to number 5 here, technically the new board president would be in charge of the
Okay.
meeting.
Take over, Bill.
Not that it's going to change anything,
Let's
just,
just continue on where we are. I went ahead and
Yeah.
nominated.
yep. So nominations for vice president?
He said Molly, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I second that.
Call the roll.
Is there any other nominations? Let's just make sure. Okay, so Bill Jewell was a first, Miller was second. Mrs. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan?
Yes.
Mrs. Morris?
Yes.
I guess congratulations are in order for our new vice president, Molly McIntosh.
At
So-
this time, do we have any comments from our visitors? Guess not, so I guess I turn this over to Dr. Bell.
Actually, Mr. Bassler.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay.
With the organizational meeting, we'll just go through the items on the agenda. The first is establish the date, time, and location for our regular monthly meetings, which was part of your packet. It's essentially the 4th Monday of the month, every month, except for holidays. So each month is listed for you. I'll need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Need a second?
Second.
Second.
I'm going to have to look up and see that second.
Mrs. Milligan. First by
Down
Mrs.
here.
McIntosh.
Oh, I'm afraid all 3 of you, unless I'm looking up, all 3 of you down there are going to sound the same to me. Roll call, Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris. Next is to establish our board member compensation, which is the same every year per Ohio Revised Code. We'll need a motion for approval.
So moved.
That's
Mrs.
first
Miller.
by
You
Mrs.
you
Miller.
should say our names, maybe.
And then they're all M's, too.
I need a
We'll get used to it.
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. McIntosh.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
Next is establish a service fund of the Board of Education according to our appropriation measure, which is already in place which is already approved as part of the budget.
Need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Milligan. Sorry. Need a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. McIntosh. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
Next is our standing authorizations for this upcoming calendar year. Again, it's basically boilerplate that we do year after year, and they're items A through the letter S on the next page.
I need a motion.
I had a question
Yes?
about like N. What is N?
N is like an insurance policy that you can insure the board against their own employees.
Oh, okay.
So if you're feeling that I'm doing something that may not be legal, you can insure yourself against my job performance.
Okay. I just didn't understand.
I hope that that never comes to fruition.
Me too. Okay, if no other questions, need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Milligan,
Second.
second by Mrs. Morris. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Next, we need an approval for our membership in the Ohio School Boards Association for 2022.
I have no questions. I need a motion.
Can I make a comment?
Okay.
Sure?
Sorry. I just wanted to say, I think that it's important to note that the Ohio School Board Association chose to end the affiliation with the National School Board Association. So I think it's important for people to be made aware of that. Thanks.
That's good. And anybody got any other questions? I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. McIntosh,
I'll second.
second by Mrs. Miller. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
and Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
Next is approval from the board to join the Ohio School Boards Association Legal Assistance Fund.
Any questions? If not, I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Miller. Need a second? By Mrs. Morris. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan.
Yes.
And then next is, as part of your packet and also from our tax budget hearing, we need approval for our tax budget for the school year 2022-23, and this is with the Warren County Auditor's Office for that time frame.
Anybody?
So moved.
Mrs. Milligan.
Second.
By Mrs. McIntosh. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
and Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
And then item number 14, we have our board committee appointments. In parentheses is who has been doing it in the past. We'll need to replace Mrs. Lanehart. And so if we just want to go through A through O and make sure that we have
Everything covered.
everything covered and people in place, and then we'll do an approval for those committee assignments. Our legislative liaison, Molly. Our OSBA delegate in the past has been Bill Jewell. We good with that?
Yeah.
Our alternate, Kelly Milligan. Our legislatively representative has been Molly in the past. We good with that?
Everybody else's.
Warren County Legislative Liaison will need a new member for that position.
Would you want to do that, Amanda?
I can't, what, is that the Career Center?
I'll be honest with you.
It
Majority-
is not the Career Center. No, it is not.
No,
I'm not aware of this ever having a meeting since I've been here.
me either.
I think you can handle it.
Sure, I'll take it on.
We have 2 curriculum, which is Molly McIntosh and Missy Miller. Maintenance, which has been Bill Jewell. Our athletic council has been Bill Jewell and Molly McIntosh. Our finance committee, if we were to need a board member for a committee meeting, which since I've been here, I've handled those on my own with moral support, once again, from the superintendent. But if we get to the point where we need board member attendance, then we have Kelly Milligan and we'll need one more.
Would you want?
Yeah.
Yeah, Amanda.
Okay. Our educational foundation has been Bill Jewell, Molly McIntosh. Our Lions Club, Bill Jewell. CERA has been Missy, and we'll need another one. Are we going to plug Amanda in there again?
Sure.
Yeah.
Music Boosters is Kelly. Student Achievement is Missy, and then our Lioness Club will need. We're going to make it a clean sweep.
Sure.
That's how I got on these committees.
Congratulations on your election. Yes.
Thank
Yeah, whoever I replace, that's where I felt.
Do you have to do anything about the Miami Valley CTC?
That's a 3-year term, and that
yeah,
was
that's right.
appointed last year, so.
Okay.
So we have items A through O. Essentially, everybody is doing the same responsibility as last year, and Mrs. Morris will be handling the positions that were held by Mrs. Lanehart. We'll need an approval for those committee positions.
Need a motion?
So moved.
First by Mrs. McIntosh,
Second.
second by Mrs. Morris. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
and Mrs. Milligan.
Yes.
If we have nothing else, we'll need a motion for adjournment.
You got, anybody else got anything on their mind?
I just wanted to talk about graduation and what we're going to do about that, if we're keeping the date that's been picked already, or if we're going to revisit that.
As soon as I've given some more information, I did not meet with Andrew today, and we'll discuss that, getting more information from surrounding, but there's nothing that was formally adopted by the board. There's nothing in the calendar as far as being formally adopted or the handbook, so we'll check on that and get back to you as soon as possible.
Okay, and one other item, I want to talk about, revisit the wrestling problem that we've got, not having a good space for our wrestlers and not having indoor bathrooms. And I'm also curious what we're doing with that money that was given to us by the hospital for athletics. I guess it was just for whatever athletics we wanted to use it for. I'm wondering if we've revisited that to see what we're going to do. I know in the past I've been told that the Pee-wee doesn't matter, but we have Pee-wee basketball games in this gym and practices in this building all the time. So I think it's unfair to do that with football and basketball and not let the wrestlers, the Pee-wee wrestlers, have places where they can wrestle, that they have indoor bathrooms. I feel like we've gone back to 1940 with our wrestling team. It was embarrassing to be at Edgewood School, and they had a really nice gym, and right above it was a big wrestling room. I don't know how that got forgotten, but I think we need to visit that. We've got, I think they told me 102 Pee-wee wrestlers, and I don't know how many are in the junior high. But I've been going to some of the wrestling meets for the high school, and it'd be hard to be real motivated if you felt like you were second class. So I think we need to really put our heads together and figure something out for that.
I'll address a couple that I know. This is the first I've heard any concerns about the wrestling. I don't know that any wrestling coaches have taken John. If they have, John has not brought it to either Mr. Huber or my attention. I'd say that they probably use the same facilities that some of those outdoor sports use, baseball, soccer, football, any of those things. They're the same locations. I mean, you know.
Except this is winter.
I understand that. But
Yeah.
the same things, and they could also bring that up, weather-related. So I've not heard about that as far as the money from the hospital. I believe we did use some of that for the
Stands.
visitors bleachers. So that's what we're looking at, and as we move forward with the stadium and the facilities upgrade, we'll look at our fundraising and our capital campaign and any other money we may have left over from the project. So those will be addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody got anything else? I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
First by Mrs. McIntosh,
Second.
second by Mrs. Miller. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan?
Yes.
Mrs. Morris?
Yes.
And Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Time of adjournment is 6:21.